Hello, I'm Stewart Swerdlow and welcome to Reality Check Mind Over Chatter. Tonight we're going to do some interesting information that I'm going to give to you, and we'll have a special guest a little bit later on. At first, I want to talk to you about some symbols that you've heard me talk about over the weeks that you may not have seen or noticed before. So luckily today I'm going to get up and show you these symbols here on this board so that we're all on the same page with what we're talking about. When I talk about the T-bars and the different T-bars in creation, we have the three versions of the capital T, the small t or cross, and the Ankh shape. And they are actually located at the pineal gland at the very center of the head. Those of you who are not able to see your T-bar, simply concentrate on the royal blue circle with the dot. Both of them have the ability to center the brain and bring the left and right hemispheres into balance. When I talk about the chakra system, I'm talking about these layers of colors or bands that go through the entire body. They start at the very bottom, over here, from the bottom of the feet all the way to the top of the thighs. And as you can see, and hopefully your colors at home are the same as we have here on the board, this is a brown color, a very earth-based grounding color. Just above that is where the chakra system actually begins. It starts from the top of the thighs to approximately the pubic bone, and the normal color, as you can see here, is a pale red. Then we go to the next band, from pubic bone to navel, a strip which is in this, what we call the sacral chakra, and that is a pale orange color. Next is the solar plexus area from the navel to the sternum. That area is a pale yellow color, and that's where all the digestive organs are. Then we go from the sternum to the collarbone. This is the heart chakra, which is a medium green color, and if you could see energy fields, you would know that oxygen has that green tone to it. Then we jump up to the thyroid or throat area, which is from collarbone to tip of nose, and that should be in a good ice blue color, which is a communication color. Then the very important area, the pineal gland area, which goes from the tip of the nose to the top of the forehead, and that color should be in a royal blue in order to be normal. And finally, at the very top or crown, from the top of the forehead to the very top of the head, we have the crown chakra, which should be in a violet color. And people do get mixed up between violet and purple, violet being more like an amethyst color and purple being more with a blue tone in it. I want to drop down, if the camera can pan down here, to the merger symbol. You've been hearing me talk about that for quite a number of shows. Merger symbol is what we use in a deprogramming technique, which basically blends the fragments of the personality together and brings all the components back to cohesive pieces. So when you hear me talk about merger, that's the one I'm talking about right here. It's a brown merger symbol on a royal blue background. You've heard me also talk about the DNA symbol, which kind of looks like a ladder or railroad track. If we can zoom in on that one, the DNA symbol. And that's usually seen in green because it involves the past, not the current moment. I want to get up here, because when we talk about this today and perhaps in the next show, about the ultimate protection technique, which is always in violet. And we can see this also on the board. And the ultimate protection technique is a violet tetrahedron inside of a violet octahedron. And when you have that combination and you put whatever you're protecting, like yourself, right in the middle of the tetrahedron, that is the ultimate form of protection. No energies can get into that, and you will be safe and protected at all time, especially when you're doing deprogramming or traveling or anything else that you're doing. If we can pan down here to what is listed as an angelic frequency, and what I also refer to as oversoul, here it is a silver infinity symbol. The violet background is is just for the background purposes. We're mainly looking for the silver infinity symbol, which when we're contacting oversoul or angelic frequencies is at the over the crown chakra, over the top of the head. And I also want to look down here at the dolphin frequency, which is at the bottom here. Dolphin frequency, we've talked about once or twice in past shows, and that basically is a way of getting on a frequency that is not human to the next level of existence. It also, if you keep that dolphin frequency in royal blue at the pineal gland, and as you're going to sleep and you do your cleansing breaths, it actually will create like a sleeping pill for you, a natural sleeping pill. And I also have here on either side the chakra colors in the chakra sock or tube that I've referred to in past shows, so that you can get the different colors here, starting at the brown, working their way all the way up to the violet. Remembering the brown is not a chakra color, but is rather the grounding color of the legs and the feet, grounding you to the earth. And then the chakra colors actually start here at the pale red and work all the way up to the violet. So I wanted you to see this before we get going today, so that we all have the same information and you know what I'm referring to. And I thought this was a very good way of doing that. And perhaps as we talk about this during our show, you can remember this, or perhaps the camera will pan back to it and you can take a look at it. I wanted to bring up a couple of points today before we get going. One of them, which is very timely and is affecting a lot of people as far as programming is concerned, is the release of the Mel Gibson movie, The Passion of the Christ. Now, many of you have heard many different events occurring around this movie. For example, the star of the show was hit by lightning twice while he was up on the cross during the filming of the show. We had a lady a few days ago who had a heart attack in Wichita, Kansas, while she was watching the show. There was a reverend in Denver in a church that put up a big banner on his church that said, "Jews kill the Lord Jesus." So a lot of people are being triggered and activated by this movie. I've talked about this before, the aspect of programming called New World Religion programming. And so I would caution all of you out there that if you're going to watch this movie, or if you even hear about it on the news or see clips of it on other shows, use that brown merger symbol that I showed you just before at the pineal gland to help reintegrate any aspects in your matrix or alters in your matrix that are associated with the New World Religion programming. That is coming up rapidly, and we're hearing a lot of events in the Middle East. For example, we had the moderate earthquake outside of Jerusalem. Then that was followed by a snowstorm across the Middle East, and that was followed by a bus being blown up also in Israeli territory. So a lot of things happening in the Middle East to trigger New World Religion programming. Simultaneously with this, we have the staged alien invasion programming being projected onto the Earth. That is being facilitated by the president, talking about putting a man on a team of people on Mars after establishing the base on the moon. Then we also have the 2 rovers on Mars that are beaming back alleged pictures of that planet, all acting as a trigger and activation. We have Popular Mechanics magazine on the front page saying what we will do when there is an alien invasion. Not if there is, but when there is. We were told that earlier this year there was a near miss of a comet that almost hit the northern hemisphere and could have destroyed life on Earth. A lot of things happening in space, a lot of threats happening in space simultaneously with this New World Religion. Basically, and I've told you this, but I'll reiterate, create a disaster on the Earth, bring in a cloned savior, bring in the staged alien invasion, so people need a global government. All of these are happening at a very fast, condensed pace because apparently time is running out as far as their agenda is concerned, and they really want to get everything consolidated in a very quick way. I just wanted to leave that with you so that we'll give you a foundation and a background as we go into our show. We have a very special guest with us today who we will call Jane O'Hare. She works at a very major global airline, which we will not name, and she's going to talk about her experiences in life And we'll go into other areas of deprogramming and even protection techniques as a result of this. So please welcome on our show Jane O'Hare. Thank you for coming.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And Jane, tell me about your earlier experiences in life. Tell me about things that may have happened to you that made you feel different or not part of the natural flow of things.
Well, as a child, I grew up in a fairly large family, but felt very alone. Basically, the parents had a lot to do. They were very busy, so we were kind of on our own. And I grew up feeling isolated, and I don't recall having a lot of dreams as a child, but what I do recall is having dreams that I could fly.
Interesting.
And I was flying a lot. I could do a lot of acrobats in my dreams. I wondered why in the dreams a lot of other people weren't up there with me. I was all by myself flying around, but I thoroughly enjoyed those dreams. And while I don't recall the dream that led up to this event, I do have my sister who relayed to me that several times as a teenager, she had the room next to me, and she would hear me screaming at night, and in the morning she would tell me about it, and I would not recall any reason for it. I don't recall any nightmare.
Was there any words that you screamed out, or did you recall anything like that?
No, she just said it sounded like somebody was murdering me. And frequently I would wake up with the bedclothes all strewn all over the place, and I would think to myself, wow, I must have had a tough night's sleep. So, but early on I did start to have insomnia and bouts of insomnia. So I did feel different as a child.
Yeah. And how old were you when you had those nightmares and you were screaming?
Oh, I think it started around the age of 12 to 14.
Oh, so it was actually almost in your teenage years when that
Yes.
began. Was there anything earlier to that?
I don't really recall. Like I said, I don't have very good memories of dreams. But I do know I developed a habit of, if I encountered something that would upset me, to be able to put that away and not even really remember it until somebody would say, well, don't you recall this person did that? Why are you talking to them? Only then, when I was reminded, would I remember that the person had done something that maybe I shouldn't be happy with them about.
So a lot of blocks
Yes.
on memory there. Have you done work on trying to get through those blockages?
No, I haven't.
Do you remember the exercise we call the green spiral staircase?
Yes.
Have you tried that one?
I did. I've done it a couple of times, and I usually end up getting off around the age of 18 months to 2 years. At another point, I got off from the age around 3 to 5 years old. When I was more of an infant, I just feel like I was in a bed, not really with anybody around me. And I felt alone then. And then the one from 3 to 5, I can't really put my finger on what it was that triggered that memory, but not strong memories of my early childhood.
Interesting. And usually what happens with someone who does have programming issues, there's blocks of time that are completely unable to remember.
Yes.
Because the trauma was so severe in that time period that the mind blocks the consciousness from seeing it so that you don't relive the trauma and then go through it again. It becomes a loop, you see. And what the programming does is it very often puts a mask memory over that, so you remember something totally different, so you don't realize anything happened to you at that time.
Right. Does being premature have anything to do with
Yes.
being programmed, possibly?
Absolutely, and that's a very good point. Because I had mentioned on other shows that programming in many cases actually starts in utero, where they actually traumatize the fetus so that it's born with a fragmented personality. Once you traumatize a child or a fetus, the personality is permanently broken up into these pieces. And to reiterate for the audience, and in fact, if I may go to the board and draw something for the audience, so the camera is prepared when I do this, if you'll excuse me, what happens is, on the matrix, when the personality fragments, it goes into a cube that is broken up by segments, and I'm not going to draw the lines because it takes too long. But this is basically what happens to the personality. It goes into a matrix of 13 by 13 by 13, and if you do the math, it comes out to 2,197 pieces that are actually broken up as compartments in the personality. And what happens is that each one of those compartments or fragments can be programmed either into a complete separate personality or a partial personality, and then there are all different kinds of constructs that can go into that. They do create it at the center of it, an internal programmer who monitors all the other pieces, and from the internal programmer they have an internal computer system that monitors, and what they call ribbon alters, which actually go around all the other alters and make sure they're doing the right thing. They're kind of like tattletale alters, but then they never really come forward. They're always in the virtual world of the matrix, but they tattle on all the pieces that are not doing their work and go back to the internal programmer, and then the internal programmer knows what they have to do for that particular compartment.
So that would kind of explain why the memories might not be there. You might be in an alter.
Exactly. Exactly, and depending on where in that cube matrix your front alter is at the moment, may not have the memory of another section.
I have been told that people find it difficult to get to know me, and that I seem to have a wall up. So I don't know if that's maybe...
And that's interesting because I always think of the walls between the compartments, the blocks, you know, it's like separate personality compartment.
Yes.
So that's very interesting. So you may have an alter that just goes to work. There are alters. It could be an alter that's just for brushing your teeth, that's one of the triggers that you have as a function. So if you're working, for example, at a major airline, something that involves travel, you could have just a travel alter, or an alter that just deals with the public, simply like that. And then the front alter, who maybe does other kind of work or just have a daily life with your family, has no memory of that alter because different function, different section of the matrix.
It's funny that you should say that. I have a friend that travels with me quite a bit, and she's known me for 20 years, and quite frequently she'll say, "Oh, I figured you were in your traveling mode," or "I figured you were in your detective mode," or "I figured you were in," and she has these little names for all of these little changes of personality she sees in me. So that could be that too, huh?
Do you notice the changes when you're doing that?
Only sometimes, and frankly, I can say to myself, it's almost like I'm watching myself, and I think, why am I acting this way? Only sometimes, and then other times I'm not even aware that I've changed. So, is that alters and...
Yes, and very often, as I say, one alter won't know what the other one is doing. But then you could have groups of alters, or what they call family of alters. Like it could be Jane 1, Jane 3, Jane 25, which have the same basic foundational programming, but with subtle differences within, so that if you're sent on a what we call a mission or have to fulfill an agenda, the alters will have to have memory of one another in order to fulfill the function. They can't be segmented like that.
So what does it mean to be specifically programmed?
Okay, very good question. And to be specifically programmed means that you have been taken physically, at least in the old days, physically for programming sessions where specific types of alters and constructs within the matrix have been placed into your psyche. The entire world is programmed, at least subliminally. But in the United States, and we've talked about this on this program before, 4 to 5% of the US population and 1 to 2% of the global population is specifically programmed. That means beyond just the subliminals, they have specific personalities and alters with specific functions to be triggered at a specific time.
And if you...
Oh, another term is sleeper. They call them sleepers as well.
So if you come from a large family, is it likely that someone else in that family is also specifically programmed?
It would probably be very likely, and I'll tell you why. The programming is generational. It goes according to genetics. So apparently, your family has the type of genetics that is very programmable and actually has a function. Okay? And so the mother and father you have combine to produce children with a specific range of genetics for specific types of programming. But that also means it's possible that the programming won't take in all of them. So then they have what we call a crop. You know, if you have 3, 4, 5 kids in a family, same mother and father, even if you put the same programming in each one of those children, they may not all be accepted in the same way. And the reason is that ultimately, even if you're programmed, there is a God mind and there is an oversoul that creates the soul personalities. And so what a soul personality is a collection or group of thought bands or mind patterns that coalesce to form your genetics. So because no two people in existence are alike, otherwise they'd be the same person, means that there are different soul personalities and thought bands in those different children, even though the genetics are similar or within a certain range. And programming can only be hooked on to mind patterns that are related to the programming. So for example, if you're born with an abandonment issue, they can put abandonment programming hooked onto that mind pattern because it will be accepted. You understand?
Yes.
So that's why it depends on your specific mind patterns that will create this specific genetics and body, and a specific type of program would go along with that. And no two people are identical, even if they have the same parents.
Yeah, there's a wide variety of blood types in my family. Does that have anything to do with mind patterns?
Do you know what the blood types are?
I think some of them have O. I know mine is A negative. So I know that they're O, and I think my father was AB.
Interesting. And what was yours again?
A negative.
A negative. Now, A and AB are the newest blood types on the planet. They're only recent. Recent meaning the last few thousand years. O is the very oldest. It's been here the longest period of time and requires more heavier proteins to maintain itself, whereas A, B, and AB require less dense protein. The implication is with a person with your genetics or your blood type is that your experience on the earth sequentially or from a, let's say, reincarnational point of view, even though we talk about simultaneous existence, we'll look at it linearly. You haven't had that long of a period of time on the earth sequentially. You're a newcomer compared to, let's say, people with O blood type who've been here since maybe day 0. Okay.
And if you have parallel lives going on simultaneously, like you just mentioned, is it possible that if you're programmed in one, then you're programmed in all of them?
Very good, very good. Depends on where you are in that simultaneous existence, because it doesn't mean necessarily this Earth. It could be an alternate Earth where there is no programming, or it could be another world where there's a different mindset. So you have to look at the specifics and know what are the circumstances. The implication is that there would be a likelihood of more programming simultaneous existences because they'd have similar or related mind patterns. Then the question becomes, do they have a victimization mentality to go along with that? Because that will attract the tyrants and oppressors. You might have the same mind pattern without the victimization, no programming.
Oh, interesting. And is there a way of getting to those simultaneous existences using your techniques? I mean, is there a way of figuring out what some of your other existences might be?
Well, Jane, of course there is. You know that anything you ask, I will have a way to answer that, you know. And yes, there is a way. In fact, using what we call the delta T form, which is nothing more than the octahedron that we saw on the ultimate protection technique on the board. The octahedron part alone, when placed over the crown chakra and connecting to that, gives you a gateway. It's like a portal into all the simultaneous existences that you have. And if above it you put the infinity in silver, the oversoul sign, that will direct you safely to an alternate existence so that you can view it. But I also caution that whoever does that technique only observes and does not try to participate, because once you start to break through into another reality, it's easy then to become attached to it in some way and circumvent your purpose in this reality.
I see.
So it's kind of like jumping a train going in another direction, even though it's on the same line, that kind of a thing. You have to be careful with what you're doing.
Do you think that the parallel existences have similar, kind of goals or purposes? Because it would seem like they'd have related existences. So I just am curious about that.
Because everything comes from God mind, the answer is yes, they're all related in some way. And because existence exists, because God mind needed to know what it is, to know itself, all things are possible. And so everything you can think of exists.
I've heard you talk a lot about the Illuminati in your work and, mind-controlled slaves. I wonder, can you be both Illuminati and mind-controlled, or is that a contradiction in terms?
Not a contradiction at all, because the Illuminati is a way of life, program themselves and their children so that their civilization, their culture and way of life never deviates. It always stays stable. And the best way to do that is through programming, so that they have their functions at a hierarchy level. But yes, they're programmed as well. And we can pick that up in the next show, because guess what? Our time is up.
Oh.
Believe it or not, you were such a wonderful guest that our time went by like nothing.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of your work.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And we'll see you next time on Reality Check with Jane O'Hare.
Sometimes I think I'll win the race. That's when I always lose my pace. Just when I think I have it all, that's when I always take a fall. And I can't help but wondering why, even though I know down deep inside it's self-satisfied.